Hello everyone, my name is Capicola and welcome to this episode of Capicola Collection, which is a series of videos that kind of revolve around Dungeons and Dragons and my thoughts and creations that I've made and wanted to share with you all. So this video is going to be about sub-races for Genasi, specifically Para Genasi, which is the combination of two elements to make a single element. For those of you who don't know, Genies in D&D 5th edition are based around elements, so there are four basic types of Genies. There is fire, which is Ifrit, there is water, which is Merid, there is air, which is a Jinn, and then there is a Dao, which is earth. And the Genasi are the children, or the offspring between them and humans or humanoids, like elves and dwarves. So that would make fire, water, air, and earth Genasi, who are the descendant of those Genies. Now, Wizards of the Coast released back in, I think, 2015, an Elemental Evil Player's Companion that they just kind of put out that gave alternative races and new spells and things like that, and among them were the Genasi. Para Genasi would be the combination of two elements to form a new element. So combining air and water, you get ice. Combining earth and fire, you get magma, and I'll go over all the different sorts that I made. But before we get started, I wanted to go over two things. The first one being that Wizards of the Coast seem to have only 4 options really available when putting traits into these sub-races. Well, these were the 4 options I noticed. They gave them environmental ability, which I think all of them kind of have, a resistance, the ability to cast a spell once a day, or they had them be able to cast 1 cantrip and 1 spell once a day. And the second thing I wanted to cover was why I picked the exact elements that I did for combining these elements into these Para Genasi. And the reason I picked them was I looked at, there's a great image that I'll probably put up for, it's called the Great Wheel Cosmology, that has like the Cinder Waste to the south, the Labyrinth Winds to the west, and then Plane of Water to the north, and then the Plane of Earth to the right, east. And in between each of those elemental planes, there was another plane where it was the two elements that bordered it being combined together. Like the plane of fire and the plane of air made the plane of ash, and the plane of air and the plane of water made the plane of ice. And the reason I bring this up is between the plane of earth and the plane of water, there are two kind of bordering planes. The first is the Mud Hills, and the second is the Swamp of Oblivion, or the plane of ooze. And given the choice between making a Mud Genasi and an Ooze Genasi, I decided on Ooze Genasi, but I still think you could take the rules that I made for an Ooze Genasi and implement it into a Mud Genasi. I just thought Ooze would be more fun to think about. But anyway, let's just go ahead and dive in. So to start, I just wanted to say that each one of these will have an either or choice for what they wanted to add +1 into. And the reason for that is, if you look at the Genasi that Wizards of the Coast already released, I think Air Genasi get +1 to Dex, Water Genasi get +1 to Wisdom, Earth get +1 to Strength, and Fire gets +1 to Intelligence. So I just thought to give the player the choice to choose whether they want +1 Dex or +1 Wisdom for an Ice Genasi. So Ice Genasi can either get +1 to Dexterity or +1 to Wisdom. They have Cold Resistance, which you have resistance to cold damage. Cold-Blooded, you can move across difficult terrain made of ice or snow without expending extra movement. You're also naturally adapted to cold climates. Finally, you have Frozen Touch. You know the Frostbite cantrip. When you reach 3rd level, you can cast the Icing Death's Frost spell once with this trait, and you regain the ability to cast it this way when you finish a long rest. Constitution is your spellcasting ability for these spells. So it's an Ice Genasi, so it's going to have a bunch of ice-related traits, with the cold damage resistance and being able to move across ice or snow, because I feel like that's their natural habitat if they were to grow up in the Frostfell or the Plane of Ice. If you're unfamiliar with the Frostbite cantrip, it actually also came out in the Elemental Evil Player's Companion that the Genasi did, and I'm pretty sure it's just a Constitution save or take a d6 cold damage, and they have disadvantage on the next weapon attack they make. And Icing Death's Frost is a spell that came out in one of the latest Unearthed Arcana Draconic options articles that Wizards of the Coast released. But what the spell does is it shoots out a cone of cold that does 3d8 cold damage, and if they fail on the Constitution saving throw, they also have their speed reduced to 0. I'm pretty sure it's a 15-foot or a 30-foot cone. I would have to check though. After that, we have the Magma Genasi, which is a combination of fire and earth, so that means you can choose either intelligence or strength to get +1 in. You have Magma Stride. You are immune to the damage caused by magma or lava. As part of this immunity, you also have resistance to fire damage. Then you have Embrace the Heat. You know the Create Bonfire cantrip. When you reach 3rd level, you can cast the Maximilian's Earthen Grass spell once with this trait. When you reach 5th level, you can cast the Erupting Earth spell once with this trait. You regain the ability to cast either of these spells this way when you finish a long rest. Constitution is your spellcasting ability for these spells. When I was coming up with these sub-races, I wanted to try my best to think up ideas that I hadn't really seen before, and I know that magma and lava is an obstacle that can be placed on any battle map, and I thought it'd be interesting to have a player race that's made of magma should be immune to magma and lava, and as part of that have a resistance to damage. I wouldn't go so far to give immunity to fire damage because that sounds kind of busted, and the reason that I picked the spells that I did for Magma Genasi are I feel like they could easily be retextured to be made of magma. Like Create Bonfire could just be pointing at a space within range to create a small little magma pool underneath someone. Maximilian Earthen's Grass could be a giant hand made of magma that goes and squeezes the life out of someone. And Erupting Earth could just be an erupting volcano. Then we have the Ooze Genasi, which is a combination of earth and water, so you can choose +1 strength or +1 wisdom. They have the Amorphous Body trait. As an action, you can cause your body to become amorphous for 1 minute, allowing you to move through a space as narrow as 1 inch wide without squeezing. While in this state, you also gain resistance to lightning and slashing damage. If, at the end of that minute, you end your turn in a space that cannot fit your normal size, your form begins to quickly be pushed into an area that can. The DM determines the closest available space that can withstand your form and moves you to that space. For every 5 feet of movement you are moved in this way, you take 1d6 force damage. You can't use this feature again until you finish a long rest. And they also have Clinging Ooze. You can cast the Spider Climb spell once with this trait, requiring no material components, and you regain the ability to cast it in this way when you finish a long rest. Constitution is your spellcasting ability for this spell. So for Clinging Ooze, being able to cast Spider Climb, I see your hands, your palms, your knees being just coated in this ooze that sticks to the wall, similar to all the other oozes that can climb things. And like Spider-Man, you can climb up any wall you see or across the ceiling or whatever you want to do. And Amorphous Body, I did research. I looked at the Black Pudding, I looked at the Gray Ooze, the Ochre Jelly, and all of them had Amorphous Body, like described here, and they also had resistance to lightning and slashing damage. So I thought, if you could momentarily go into this form, you should have resistance to lightning and slashing and, squeeze through tight spaces like they do. And then I thought there might be consequences if you end your turn in a space that can't hold your body and this trait ends. So that's why I felt the need to add this secondary paragraph. Next we have the Dust or Sand Genasi, which is a combination of air and earth, so they get +1 to dexterity or +1 to strength. And they have the Quick Dispersion trait. As a bonus action, you are able to create a trail of dust or sand in a 60-foot line away from you, possibly deterring any creatures attempting to follow you. When you leave a trail in this way, creatures have disadvantage on any checks relating to tracking you, given that they do not see you produce this trail. In addition, you can use a bonus action to douse a flame within 10 feet of you. This can be a torch, a campfire, a creature engulfed in flame, and so on, as long as the amount of flame doused does not exceed a 5-foot space. And they also have Debilitating Soot. You can cast a Blindness Deafness spell once with this trait, requiring no material components, and you regain the ability to cast it this way when you finish a long rest. Constitution is your spellcasting ability for this spell. I like the idea of a Sand Genasi being able to throw out this fake trail for any possible pursuers to follow instead of actually following them, giving them the disadvantage on survival checks. But I also like the idea of a Sand Genasi being able to produce so much sand that it puts out, the screaming gnome barbarian who's caught fire. And Debilitating Soot, the idea to be able to cast blindness or deafness with sand, was an idea that I got from one of my favorite animes.
Pocket sand.
And then there's the Ash or Smoke Genasi, which is a combination of air and fire. They can either get a +1 to dexterity, a +1 to intelligence. And they have the Ashen Lungs trait. You have advantage on saving throws made against harmful gases and vapors, such as Cloud Kill and Stinking Cloud effects, inhaled poisons, and the breath weapons of some dragons. You're also naturally adapted to extreme heat. And they also have Smoldering. You can cast the Gaseous Form spell once with this trait, requiring no material components, and you regain the ability to cast it this way when you finish a long rest. Constitution is your spellcasting ability for the spell. So Smoldering, being able to cast the Gaseous Form spell, being able to kind of return to your natural state of smoke or ash and just become this small cloud that can fit into tight spaces. Ashen Lungs, being able to withstand vapors and things like that, because you're smoke or ash and you're naturally kind of caustic yourself. Being adapted to extreme heat is just being the product of heat. I was also considering adding fire resistance to the subrace, but I'm still kind of not quite sure. Let me know what you guys think. And finally, the Steam Genasi, a combination of fire and water, so they can either get +1 to intelligence or +1 to wisdom. And they have Revealing Vapor. Once per long rest, as an action, you can expel steam from your body in a 20-foot radius sphere around you, creating a light steam cloud that follows you as you move, and the sphere spreads around corners. It lasts for 1 minute or until a wind of moderate or greater speed, at least 10 miles per hour, disperses it. The mist makes it difficult to make out the finer details of the creature within the mist, possibly hiding their identity. In addition, invisible creatures and items that are in the steam cloud are vaguely outlined while in the sphere, making them visible. And they also have Kinetic Force. You know the Steam Vent cantrip. When you reach 3rd level, you can cast the Blur spell once with this trait. You regain the ability to cast either of these spells in this way when you finish a long rest. Constitution is your spellcasting ability for these spells. So for Revealing Vapor, I thought it would be a good idea that Steam Genasi, if they were to get in trouble, they could expel out this steam cloud that would hide the finer features of their faces so that maybe they couldn't be identified later. And for being able to see invisible creatures and items, I thought of the old spy movies where they take a fine mist or a spray and they spray and they're able to see the tripwire, the laser tripwire. And then for Kinetic Force, I thought that being able to cast Blur on yourself, just this vaporous cloud surrounding you, kind of deceiving those who look at it, and kind of like a mirage-like appearance to it. And for Steam Vent, this is just the Poison Spray cantrip remodeled to do fire damage instead of poison. I changed this from a spray of poison to a torrent of steam, and I changed this from poison to fire. And I'm always fine for making changes like this to cantrips or spells if it makes sense within the player's character. Like, one of my players was playing a lightning-centric warlock, and instead of having frostbite dealing cold damage, they changed it to spark, and the only difference was it dealt lightning damage instead. Before I go, I want to give a shout out to my players. These are people who I've played D&D with or am currently playing D&D with, and they've been so supportive, they've been so encouraging with this channel, liking my videos, watching them, and leaving such comments like, "Hello, what a nice boy, and that's a spicy ham." Thanks, guys. But honestly, these are the people that I've played D&D with. We've sat around the table and we've just had a great time and have praised me and encouraged me enough so that my head got big enough to make this YouTube channel. So for that, I'm eternally grateful. Thank you guys. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys liked the video and wanted to comment on what the content was, then please leave it down in the comments below and subscribe for more. Thanks.